Good evening, everyone. My name is Cadet Rump, and welcome back to our Forged in Fire podcast. Before we get started, I'd like to give a special thank you to Cadet Justin Venencia, my Zoom coordinator, for helping making this happen. For the audience, we do ask if any of you have any questions during the duration of this podcast that you submit them using the chat function, and at the end, if we have time, we will get to your questions. But tonight, we have a very special guest, Mr. Anfang. Mr. Anfang brings years of military and law enforcement expertise in both the information and communications fields. His career started in the Marine Corps, where he was deployed to Fallujah, Iraq in 2004 and was honorably discharged at the rank of sergeant. He returned to the military service as a naval officer and also joined the New York City Police Department. As a detective, Mr. Anfang was assigned to the NYPD's International Domestic Liaison Unit, focused on the coordination of domestic and international law enforcement agencies to implement interrogancy and international training ventures. Mr. Anfang currently works for a smaller police agency just outside of New York City. This, coupled with his military experience, has provided him with a holistic perspective on law enforcement and leadership on a greater spectrum. But I won't say anything else on him. I'll let him speak for himself. Mr. Anfang, the floor is yours.
Could you hear me?
We got you clear, Mr. Anfang.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you, David, for the awesome introduction. I am honored to be here tonight. This is a great opportunity for new young leadership, cadets at at a prestigious university. So thank you very much for having me. As far as my bio, I'll go a little bit more into it. I did 4 years active duty in the Marine Corps. I enlisted at 17, right after 9/11. I grew up in New York City, so the World Trade Center meant a lot to me. Losing people that I personally knew in those towers really affected me and shaped me and my character to what it is today. Fast forward, I got out of active duty service. I went to college, I completed my undergraduate degree in 3 years. I became a member of the New York City Police Department, which was a great experience, a big eye opener. New York City has a lot going on. And at the same time, I also enlisted as a naval intelligence specialist. While doing that, I completed my master's degree, and then I got commissioned as a naval intelligence officer. Those experiences propelled me into my next facet of my New York City Police Department career, working in the Intelligence Bureau. And initially, I was there to recruit assets for the New York City Police Department that help with terrorism cases domestically and worldwide. Fast forward a couple of years, I had two beautiful daughters, and now my focus in life has changed a lot to being a soldier slash police detective to now a father. That is my primary responsibility now. And I took a job right outside of New York City as a police officer working in a smaller town, but policing still hasn't changed, big city or small town policing. So thank you, David, for having me tonight. Colonel and Mass Sergeant, thank you for this opportunity. And I'm here to answer any questions for this podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on with us, Mr. Anfang. I have to ask, what motivated you to join the military and law enforcement and take that route?
So as I initially mentioned, 9/11. 9/11, I actually saw the first tower come down with my own two eyes. I went to a school in Staten Island, New York, which is right across, literally I could see the Twin Towers every single day. And I was in my junior year of high school, and I saw the first tower, saw both towers smoking, and then the second, and then the first tower come down. So right there and then I knew, America needed motivated young men, and yes, sir.
So thank you, Mr. Anfang, and everything you've done for this country up to this point. So for tonight, we're focusing on the topic of character development would you say has helped you a lot during your years of experience in the military and law enforcement? To you, Mr. Anfang, how do you define character? And what do you think makes a good leader?
Very good questions. So character. Naturally, one, and most likely anybody could define what character is in their own way, in their own perspective. But before I would ask this question to anyone, including my subordinates or my seniors, and even my peers, and your position soonly as a newly minted second lieutenant, I would first ask my people, so the people that are working for me, my peers, to tell me about themselves. We have to, and we should learn about people to understand where they're coming from. And basically peer into their lives, peer into their upbringing to try to figure out how they think and what they value. So this will give me a good snapshot of their character, and so I could understand where they're coming from. That being said, I would take this snapshot, this information that they just provided me based on my questioning, and see what's important to them. See what really their value system, what their day-to-day life is like, and that would give me. How would I define a character? I would define a character is your upbringing, your life experiences. What do you value as an individual? What's important to you every day? Do you get up every single morning, as Admiral McCraven says, and make your bed? It's the simple things that define our character, and that's what character is to me.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Admiral McCraven. Just to, I believe, wasn't he the one that gave the commencement speech? He was the Navy SEAL that gave the commencement speech. Do I have that right?
Yes, he gave a commencement speech at the University of Texas, which I believe he was a student at.
Yeah, yeah. I actually watched that speech. That was a good one by him. And you bring up learning people from where they're about. You said you were born in New York City, born and raised. I'm sure you've met a lot of people during your time in the military from all across the country. So I think that's very important, getting to know people. I know in our battalion, we have people from the West Coast to the East Coast, and I'm still trying to learn people myself. So thank you for bringing that point up. So in the military and for all leaders, it's imperative for them to identify when their troops are undisciplined, they're dishonest, and their basically morale is low. What are some ways that we can identify these traits, and what impact does that have on the unit?
Just to touch on before, not to backtrack, but I bring up this point as far as a good leader. I know it was kind of two-folded question you asked me before, and what traits make someone classified as a good leader? And I first and foremost always bring a good leader, from my perspective, is learning how to actively follow. And that's not just being a follower. And everybody says, well, you have to learn how to be a good follower to be a good leader. And that is true, but actively follow. So what do I mean by that? We all must take orders at some point, as well as start from the lowest levels of leadership. Private, either that's a person in a school, working in the private sector, sweeping a mop. We all must, at some point, we're at the lowest levels of leadership. And as an officer, or soon to be officer in your case, a newly minted second lieutenant, or even an enlisted as a private, we all have to follow and take orders from those appointed over us. And those experiences, in my opinion, will make us good leaders. If we take the good points of each people we interact with, and that's in the private sector, and that's in your personal upbringing, those make us good leaders. So I hate to backtrack, but I think that's important. So being a good leader is being I believe, a very good active follower, someone that pays attention to the small details in life and takes what they like from each person they interact with, even somebody that's not in their chain of command, even somebody that's not really in their day-to-day life, taking value sets and skill sets from them and implementing them in leadership. So that's a good leader to me. And for the next question, as far as undisciplined, dishonest, and unmotivated troops, and what are some ways we can identify these traits? First and foremost, as a good leader, we have to know our people. So you as a newly minted second lieutenant, I would rely heavily on my NCOs. And what do I mean by that? Your NCOs are going to be in the thick and thin with their personnel, your subordinates, every single day. They're going to be there for every single muster. They're going to be there for the PT evaluation, assess PT every morning. With that being said, this is a great time to see and evaluate your people and know what they're like and know what makes them tick. And by doing that, your NCOs and yourself included, because you should be out there with them and showing that you're part of the team. Even though you are an officer, you are part of this team and you are going to be the tip of the spear. You are going to be in the front of the pack. You're going to see your personnel and some of your troops being, you're going to see them unshaven. You're going to see them uniforms not properly fitting. Maybe they're being overweight. And these are problems that your NCOs and yourself should correct instantly, because those little things become big things. Not paying attention to detail, like just 8 to muster morning, will, basically become this bigger, it'll fester into a bigger problem. And you're going to see those undisciplined and dishonest troops much quicker than you would for a motivated troop. So identifying them, you're going to see the small things. They're going to be late to muster. They're going to be overweight. They're not going to shave. They're not going to follow the simple instructions that they have. If you're going out to a field exercise, they're going to be missing gear. They're not going to be team players. You're going to see that. What impact does it have on your unit readiness and your leaders? Every person counts. Like I said, I went from New York City Police Department, this massive 35,000 plus police agency with a $6 billion budget, to a town police department with about 70 people, and I would say a several $1 million budget. And everyone counts, regardless of big or small. The Army is that big monster in the machine. It's the 10-pound, 100-pound gorilla in that room. The Army is that. However, every person counts, and it's important that you as a leader, that you as a soon-to-be officer, see that and recognize that, and really rely on your NCOs and let them know that if they identify a problem, to correct it, and if they need help, that's where you come into play. How do we mitigate this early on? How do we mitigate the small problems early on? How do we pay attention to detail so they don't become and fester and become bigger problems? And it definitely affects your unit readiness. It definitely affects the battle space. So let's tackle the small problems first, and if the big problems come our way, we'll tackle those as well.
I appreciate that you said every person counts. That really stuck with me. Now, you were honorably discharged as a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and you were mentioning the details of soldiers being overweight, or they're unshaven, or they forgot something when they went to the field. Has there been times where there was actually an officer that addressed that instead of an NCO? How was that approached?
That's a phenomenal question. In the Marine Corps, I can't speak for the Army, but I could definitely speak for the Marine Corps, and not so much the Navy, but the Marine Corps. Every layer of leadership, especially from the ground up and the top down, will address an individual, at least when I was in, that they have a discrepancy, either minor discrepancy or major discrepancy. And officers definitely address those individuals, as well as all the officers. Obviously, you praise in public and reprimand in private as best as you can. And I really believe in that motto. There's no reason to bring somebody down. You don't have to. If it's not a dire emergency, if it's not life or death like combat, you have the time afforded to you to take care of those problems, in a private space. So should officers correct those problems? 100%. An officer should be just as like an NCO. Maybe you're not going to deal with the daily minutia as your NCOs will be, but you are in charge. You are just as important as that mass sergeant, as that staff sergeant, as that corporal, as that PFC. It counts. There's no I in team, and I know it sounds cliche. There isn't. We all count. And especially, we don't know what the world is going to bring us. We don't know if tomorrow, let's say, fast forward a year, 2, 3 years, when you graduate, you don't know what fighting hole you may be in. You don't know what, battle space. You don't know where you're going to be. Everyone counts. Um, but what I will say is this: we must treat people as human beings. Yes, they're soldiers first, and they took an oath to protect and defend the United States and the Constitution. But we must treat people with respect and dignity, regardless of where they come from. And I firmly believe that. And I think that in young leadership, having those bars, and I remember I already spent 9.5 years as enlisted before I got my commission. It really helped me out. It really helped me to hit the pause button before I jumped on somebody like I would have as a young sergeant or as a young corporal in the Marines. I took a minute, I took my breath, I thought about what I was going to say and how I was going to a private space or a place that wasn't in public, and I corrected the condition. And I find that works best because you know what? Today it's a small matter. If you treated that individual with respect, they'll never forget you, hopefully, and they'll remember, you know what? That lieutenant, that second lieutenant, he wasn't wrong. He was actually right. Maybe tomorrow I'll do better for him. And that may take this young, unmotivated PFC and turn him or her around, and you may sergeant major of the Marine Corps, or the Army in your case, and you don't know what that encounter is going to be. It may have a long-lasting effects.
Excellent. You bring up a lot of solid points. You said you spent 9 years as enlisted before switching over to the officer side. You miss the enlisted side sometimes, or?
No. It's a great question. So I transitioned from the active duty Marine Corps. It was a very big change. I also went from a combat element, so I was a radio operator as an enlisted Marine with an infantry unit. I went out. I got out of active duty service. I immediately, like within a year or two, reaffiliated with the Navy Reserves as an intelligence specialist. Different animal. The Navy and the Marine Corps are very different animals, very different. And their leadership approach is a more, just a different style. I'll leave it at that. And it was difficult. So do I love my enlisted time? Yes. It was very difficult for me initially to become an officer and wear the bars because I felt like I was missing out on dealing with the everyday troops and seeing, I guess the daily grind, seeing the small tasks getting done and actually doing it myself. As an officer, it's the big picture. It's the 100-yard stare. What are we looking at? What is the commander's intent? And honestly, they're both very important missions. I love being an officer. It's probably one of my, greatest experiences. But being enlisted really helped me become a better officer. For me, I needed that experience personally. I'm glad I had that experience. And again, it gives me that moment to pause, remember what those troops are going through because I was there, and probably become a better leader.
Thank you. Now, whether on the police force or in a military unit, what practices have you seen best to help develop someone's character?
Okay, good question. Character development. So character development, I have a quote on my phone and I'll read it to you. And I look at it every single day of my life. And it says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit." And that's from Aristotle, okay? So that character development is in every day. So every day you as a newly minted officer, or every day as sergeant, the platoon sergeant, platoon commander, whatever your role is, by doing something every day and doing it well. And is from the it's a quote: "Anything worth doing is worth overdoing." It is. Go out there and do the best you can, and your subordinates will see that. Wear that uniform with pride. Stay fit. Stay ready. You don't know what life's going to bring at you, and by training properly. So when you do your training evolutions, and and you do them, and you do them with the intent that this is going to be for real. You your barracks inspections. Your NCOs are going to be doing that. Your officers, your sergeant majors are going to be there inspecting. You're going to be doing your uniform inspections. Those little things, again, wearing your uniform properly, making sure your room is squared away, making sure your weapon systems are clean, making sure your gear is in order, making sure you just comport yourself and compose yourself in a manner that if anybody outside of the U.S. military saw you, how would they look upon you? You are representing the United States Army right now. You are the future leadership. You are going to be at the forefront this world brings us. Those little things build that person's character. So we are what we become via habit. We have to habit form. And again, back to Admiral McCraven, and not to toot his horn, just by making your bed every single morning. The little things matter, and the little things count, and those build character. Also, hard work builds character. You being, an officer, a newly minted officer, and you having your NCOs and your staff NCOs working for you, and pushing your people, and you should push your people. Nothing in life is easy, and like I said, anything doing is worth overdoing. You're going to have to push your personnel, and some days are going to be longer than others, but they're going to be fruitful, because when it matters, when it's time to pull that trigger, or when it's time to help their peers in an emergency situation, either medical or whatever life brings your way, like in an Army-Navy football game, which I don't want to discuss right now. Scoring that touchdown is important, because everyone on that field has a role. So that builds character. That team development, that teamwork is character building.
And you mentioned the idea of staying fit and staying ready. And something we do in ROTC in every military unit, we train to stay ready. With this current situation of we're pushing out a year with this pandemic, we have seen obstacles in training. How would you battle or overcome these obstacles to continue to stay ready with your soldiers or with your team on the police force?
Good question. It's been something that a lot of us have been dealing with. I know that in my own home, I have a personal gym. I know that in the Navy and in the Marine Corps, but specifically the Navy, I went to school to become a fitness instructor. And the Navy, they train you for very small confined spaces to work out. And I'm not saying the Navy is the hallmark for physical fitness. But what I will tell you is this: you could pretty much do push-ups, sit-ups, eat healthy as best as you can, minus a medical condition that you may have. And that's you're going to deal with that on a case-by-case basis. And you, as a newly minted officer, should know your personnel, and if they have those conditions, how to tackle that separately. But there's no excuse. There's no excuse. Like tonight, I have my kids, they're in tutoring now, literally as we speak. I have to do homework with them. I am going to go do mountain climbers. I am going to do burpees. I am going to go take myself on that treadmill and push myself as hard as I can tonight. Not throw up, but push myself, because you know what? When I go to work and I get in a foot pursuit and somebody's trying to shoot and kill me, I want to be ready for whatever life throws at me. And that is not everybody, and every civilian in the private sector doesn't think like that. But you know what? You never know what life brings at you. And what I will tell you with COVID-19, in my opinion, people that were more fit that did get this virus tended to do better. And what does that mean? It's just basic, it's a basic equation. People that are more fit, even with a common cold, tend to heal faster and get better. I am not a doctor, and I'm not giving medical advice, but this is just common sense. You as an officer would say, okay, yes, I get the pandemic. We may not be able to PT in large groups. So how do you tackle that? Smaller groups, wear your PPE, whatever your requirements are for your school and for your unit, for this, follow them. Listen to the orders from those that are given appointed, above you, and follow the medical mandates. But I don't want to hear excuses. Stay fit. And that will really help you. Again, that's the baseline. Fitness is the baseline, and if you want to be more than fit, well, that's on you. But you need to meet the standards of the Army, and just as a human being, for pride and personal appearance. Again, that goes back to your character development. What is this person? How does he or she stand? Are they standing hunched over? How do they see themselves in the world? And that for you as a leader, and if you see somebody lean over and just hunched, maybe they're having a bad day, maybe you want to pull them to the side. What's going on? What's going on there, Corporal? What's going on there, Sergeant? Ask them. Care. Caring really matters. So no excuses for me.
That was, I'm just trying to take some notes of it, and you said some things that I definitely want to try to do for myself personally and push people, given that I'm going to be leading a platoon of soldiers within these next couple months. But you did mention the small groups, PPE, and just overall staying fit. And for our battalion, we have faced obstacles behind PT in certain training events, but we've still been getting after it through decentralized PT sessions and giving leaders the ability to go work out by themselves. So I'm glad that you pushed that out and said that. Great points. My next question for you, Mr. Anfang, would be, do you find character development to be the responsibility of the person themselves or the responsibility of the mentor, coach, or direct leader of that individual?
Got it. So you mentioned before about unmotivated troops. It's hard to motivate people. It's not being a leader is not easy. If everybody could do it, they would do it. And clearly that is not the case. And you as a soldier, your baseline, in my opinion, is, OCS. That is a baseline. The baseline for your enlisted soldiers are boot camp. It's the recruit training or their training phase. And during those phases, they build character, okay? They learn the rules and regs of the armed forces. So there's some character development. So it falls upon a little of everyone. So you as a leader, if you see one of your troops maybe down and out, maybe not doing so well, maybe they get caught in a lie like we mentioned before, maybe just being late, so simple things, you may have to motivate them or find out what motivates them to build them back up, okay? A good leader also knows his personnel, and I mentioned that earlier. What motivates this person? Where are they coming from? Are they coming from, what kind of home did they come from? What are their life experiences? Did they come from a military family? Did they come from New York City? Did they come from Texas? That matters. So you as a leader have to find out what makes them tick, what motivates them. And if they need a little extra, so be it. If they're a little, maybe they're not conforming to the standards of the United States Army, help them conform. Have that NCO. Maybe you want to get out there with them. Maybe help them PT. Maybe they can't master one of the evolutions in the process of your assessments. Maybe they're failing some kind of academic course or whatever the Army has to throw at them. How do you help them? And by helping them and not just, pointing it off and say, this guy's a turd, and the common term in the military is a shitbag. I hate to say that, but, maybe they are, but so that also falls on you as a new leader. Where have you failed? Because if that person's not self-motivated, is not a self-starter, where has the leadership failed? Okay. And has the leadership done everything in it to correct that condition? And if you haven't, then you failed as a leader. But if you have, then you have to address that accordingly. So if there's a disciplinary problem, that must be addressed. If there's a substance abuse problem, that must be addressed. So there's a whole plethora of issues that you as a leader will have to deal with. So it's the responsibility of everybody. And you as a leader are going to have to find out who on your team needs more help and guidance and who doesn't. And that really falls on you, because everyone counts in your team. And, again, either you're flying drones or whatever the Army has you doing specifically, you're still part of the.
Hello?
Yep, I'm here. I just want to make sure that answered your question.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It faded in and out. But I really liked how you intertwined the relationship between the leader and the led. That was great. What leadership skills do you find were most useful for you when you were in the Marine Corps?
Okay, so being flexible. Being flexible is not easy. So I don't want to use any profound words, but the Marine Corps like the term teams. So that learning how to deal with small trials and tribulations and don't sweat the small stuff. And what do I mean by that? Some nights our NCOs and our staff NCOs and our officers kept us out late. And they kept us out late because maybe we failed in evolution. Maybe, personnel were failing and just we weren't working together as a team. Learn, don't sweat the small stuff. Tomorrow's another day. And that really helped me, not sweating the small stuff. Also, learning to have fun, even in the worst case. So when it's freezing cold outside and you're miserable with life and you're in a field and your sergeant major, your master sergeant comes over to you and says, "Hey, Sergeant Anfang, why didn't you shave?" And you're just miserable about life. You haven't showered in 2 weeks. And you say, "You're 100% Sergeant Major, you're 100% Master Sergeant. I'm wrong. I'll correct this right now." And you just smile and you take care, you do what you're told to do, and you laugh about it later on. And I had a great experience. I had a chief warrant officer, a gunner in Iraq with me, and we had several firefights together. And he was always a hard ass. He was always on my case, and I was a corporal at the time. And he would always yell at me, this, that, and when we came home from our deployment, he said to me, "Corporal Anfang, I was really hard on you, and I'm sorry." And I said, "Sir, no reason to be sorry. I'm home. I made it." And every time he yelled at me, I actually laughed inside. And I knew you were always busting my chops because you wanted me to succeed. And he did. So don't sweat the small stuff. Tomorrow is another day. Have fun while you're doing it. You're young people. Enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride. You could always be like, I got to tell you, in my opinion, being a police officer is a much more difficult job for me than being an officer in the service in this sense. I feel that 24/7 when I work or when I'm out on duty, we have body cameras, we have cameras on the car. I am constantly being monitored. I don't think there's any other profession out there that's being monitored like I am. And we're constantly criticized. In the service, I didn't have that. I got to have, and in the police department, I have fun, but have fun with it. Some days are going to be bad, some days are going to be good. What did you learn from yesterday? And move on.
Yes, and I'm just thinking about the time you just said when you're in the field and your sergeant major came up to you. I feel like it's those times right there, those memories that last forever. And I was just thinking back to a couple of times when we went on FTXs with our battalion. And thinking about when I was a young freshman, I'm laying down in the snow, pulling security. I'm like, what am I doing? And then just looking over to some of my peers and realizing that, seeing their facial expressions and seeing that we shared the same amount of um, like suck, if you will, but we're there together. So I like how you brought that up.
Yeah. So just to go back to that and back to the suck, when we invaded Fallujah, I'll just never, I had my MVGs on at night and I'm seeing the bullets flying and I'm like, I thought it was a video game. It was insanity. And what kept me going was I had a major next to me. I had a full bird colonel that I was with, and I had, several enlisted Marines with me. And I'm like, we're all in this together. It sucks. I've been up for 19 hours, but we're a team and we're here for a mission and we're going to get it done. And just like your FTX, yeah, it was cold. Yeah, you were in the snow, but you know what? It built character and you're a better person today for it. And you're here to talk about it and you smiled. You just smiled. And when you're 55, 67 years old, you're going to be with your grandchildren and you're going to laugh about it.
Absolutely, I believe that. You mentioned a couple different leaders during your time in the military and police. You mentioned Admiral McRaven, your sergeant major and the major just now. Um, what are some examples of leaders to you that have displayed excellent character and leadership skills that you look to?
Great question. So right off the top of my head, so I drove Colonel John Tulin, which became a 3-star lieutenant general, and I also got to drive General Mattis in Iraq, known as Mad Dog Mattis. General Mattis was a trip. I got to see him live, and he was a 2-star general at the time, and he was an interesting character. What I loved about him, and I got to see, he wanted to be in the front of the fight. You know, even though he was a flag officer, he was a general officer, he was out there with his troops in the fight, and I love that. And that to me is a leader, especially in the Army and in the Marine Corps specifically. We're out there in the fight, and you have to bring your fight to whomever it is that's fighting with you. And that fight has changed a lot, but he was at the tip of the spear. He was at the front leading his troops. So I love that. General Tulin, at the time he was a colonel, I loved how he advocated for his troops, as for his Marines. We had soldiers, we had coasties, and we had sailors in his charge. He had 8,000 Marines in a joint task force. He advocated for all of them. And he tried his best to put their safety first, even though we were in the battle space. I love that. And that's why it motivated me to become an officer, was that 100-yard, 1,000-yard picture. The small fire team, which is just as important as that colonel making his decision. You got to care for your people. You got to put them first, but also you have to put the mission first. So it's a very tough balance. And I love that about leadership, and how you could manage a little bit of everything, even while getting the mission accomplished. And I will say, my old partner from the police department, and I'll bring him up, he was a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps. He did 4 combat deployments overseas. He lost many men in his charge. And what I love him, he's time. He keeps me in shape. We constantly go to the firearms training. And what I love about him is he would do everything that I would do 5 times over. And regardless of his rank and his age, he's still out there in the fight. And I believe a good leader. And both of those men I mentioned, and even my sergeant major that was with me overseas, they were all out there in the fight with us. They were all in the front with us. They never stood in the back, and they wanted to take care of their personnel. And that to me is critical. It's the most important thing I could do as a leader.
Yes. Thank you. Now, when we talked about some discipline issues during your time, and just knowing the little things and paying attention to details, which is absolutely critical for each leader to do. And each leader is going to have their own time where they deal with an integrity violation, someone not doing something correctly that's going to be tested, discipline issues. Can you describe a recent situation that you were in? Maybe you had to deal with an integrity violation, maybe on the police force, or discipline issue?
Absolutely. I'll use experience as one as an enlisted Marine, and then as an officer in the Navy. We had one of my Marines had unbeknownst to me, had a substance abuse problem. So I lived in Southern California at the time. I was stationed in Camp Pendleton. We were close to the Mexican border. There was no really restriction at the time for Marines to go into Mexico. And, a lot of us went down to Mexico, cheap booze, and it was a good time, different parties and stuff like that, different, clubs they had. But this individual specifically was going down there to buy drugs and use the drugs. And so he did a deployment overseas, not with me. And clearly he had some mental health problems that we didn't really see at first, especially me as his direct NCO. But I noticed him, again, small things, him being late to muster in the morning, his head properly, or taking care of his uniform standards. So I asked him, I said, what's going on? And, he said, no, I'm just having a hard time with family. So I let that go for a little bit. And then I realized, well, he was full of it. He was lying. He was an integrity violator. He was going down to Mexico to buy drugs and consume the drugs. So what I did was I brought up my chain of command, and they dole tested him randomly, and he failed. And that individual was kicked out. Now that was to be caring and try to help this individual. But the same token, I did not want his bad decisions affecting my other personnel and my other troops. So did I make a tough decision? Yeah. Was it the right one? Absolutely. Fast forward to my time as a naval officer. I was in charge of the fitness for about 150 personnel in one of my units. A lot of people, even senior to me. So, and when it came time to do the weigh-ins, there was people that clearly were overweight that somehow passed these assessments, these weigh-ins. So me giving people a second chance, because we all make mistakes as human beings, I basically put them on a notice. I said, this was, so basically it was a drill weekend, so it was a reserve drill weekend. I said, that was your sampling or your first, I guess it was your trial weigh-in period. I said there was some discrepancies in the note taking, in the record keeping, and I said that's on me. That's my leadership failure. So basically, I gave everyone an out, even though it was senior to me. Moving forward, I will be conducting every assessment from here on out. So next month, you had the people that didn't come to drill, who was sick, who wasn't. But for the most part, everyone passed their assessment, and they had a successful PT evaluation, and most of them passed. And at the end of the day, my commanding officer, his job is to make sure his troops are ready for deployment and ready for whatever the good Lord or our country gets thrown at. So if there's if there's some kind of incident or action that happens, he can send his troops downrange. And he was appreciative of the work that I put into it, because I noticed there was violators. I know there's people lying about their fitness abilities, and I squared that away, because a lot of those people that were in his charge actually went downrange to support SOF units in the Army, SOF units in the Marine Corps. So they were a direct representation of him and a direct representation of the Navy. So by having integrity and doing the right thing, I gave them a chance. They succeeded and they made it. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely.
I know it was long-winded, but sorry for that, but it was just.
No, you're all right, Mr. Anfang. I'm just trying to put into light what it is you say that they didn't show up for drill. What's the process of that if people continuously just do not show up and continue to commit these violations?
So the reserves are a different animal. The one thing that I do love about the reserves in all military branches is you get folks from all over the country, and you also get people with amazing talents and abilities. So they're usually a little older. They've had active duty service, so they had that under their belt. And they also have very unique private or civilian jobs that bolster the Army or bolster whatever service they're in, the mission capability. It was difficult because a lot of people, had their own lives outside, so they have to be citizen soldier per se, and that's very difficult to do. So people that absconded, people that didn't show up to drill, we first try to mitigate it at the local level. So we reached out to them. Is there something going on in your home? Is there anything that the chain of command can help you with? Let's use your chain of command as a support system. What could we do to help you? And if that didn't work out, we started administrative action. So we started an administrative separation. We started NJPs or page 11s, whatever you have in your arsenal as an officer, at your tool belt, utilize it. But first and foremost, see what's going on before you hit the hammer. Before you lay the hammer down with the punishment. You first find out what's going on with your personnel. Can you help them? Some things you will not be able to help them with. Some people get arrested in the private sector, in the civilian world, and they get DWIs or they do other crime, they commit other crimes. Sometimes you can't help, but sometimes you can. And first and foremost, try to help them. If you can't, then you start the administrative process, and whatever that is, whatever guidance you get from your commander, follow that guidance and adhere to it.
Can you go more in depth about the time when you were in NYPD detective and what kind of crimes you were overseeing?
So, as a detective, I chiefly dealt with intelligence matters. My role was to actually go out and recruit informants for the New York City Police Department and their terrorism cases. Sounds like a lot, and I'm not going to go too much in detail with that, but basically, New York City is one of the biggest targets for terrorism in the United States of America. So post 9/11, New York City created and stood up or revamped the Intelligence Bureau, which is separate from the Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is an FBI and local partnership. The NYPD said, you know what? We need to do it on our own. We can't let this happen in our city again. So they stood up an Intelligence Bureau. The Bureau consisted of linguists. The Bureau consisted of cryptologists and people with all different skill sets, people that had intelligence backgrounds. I'll give you an example. My team consisted of all Army uniters except me. I was the only non-Army uniter in the unit. We also had linguists that spoke many different languages. And what my job was to find bad actors and basically find people that help us find bad actors and put them away and prosecute them through the court system. So basically, it was a network of informants to weed out any ill or evil doing in New York City via the terrorism realm, not the criminal, well, terrorism and criminal realm.
You gave a lot of great advice. I'm going over my notes right now. A lot of great things you said that I definitely want to use and implement into my leadership style. Um, to wrap things up, my last take question for you I would have is, what advice would you give to future junior leaders of our United States Army to help them be successful in their careers?
Well, first off, I'll leave that to the end about the Army-Navy football game.
All right.
What definitely learn from your NCOs, learn from your staff NCOs, learn from the people that have been around the block, and utilize and capitalize on their experience. That doesn't mean do everything they tell you to do and they're always right. No, pay attention. There are good NCOs, there are good staff NCOs, but there are also bad staff NCOs. People slip through the cracks. So definitely rely on your senior leadership in the enlisted and the officer corps. Have a good relationship, have an open door policy with them, with your staff NCOs, your NCOs, and even your personnel. If something going on, naturally you want to run up the chain of command, but have that relationship with these leaders that have been around the block. 2, always give somebody the time of day if feasible. If you have time and you see something's going awry with your personnel and they're having a hard time, maybe the staff NCOs, maybe they don't want to go there, NCOs, say, hey private, hey corporal, hey whoever, you want to talk, learn about them, actually care. Don't just sit there and say, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. Take notes. And you know what? If there's something going on, if they're from Texas and there's a football game or a baseball game going on, pay attention. They're paying attention and they're watching everything you do as they're, you're their leader. So pay attention. And I would say that by just giving a little bit and caring a little bit, it goes a long way. Also, don't ever stop bettering yourself as a leader. What do I mean? If there's classes you could do, if there's courses the Army or Joint Forces College, or even in the private sectors, the college class you could, or about anything, take it. Spend the time, commit to it, and complete it. You want to always constantly improve yourself. Learn a language. How do you stand out? What makes you better? And that's what I would say. Don't ever, everyone wants to settle for just, okay, I could do this and this is all I have to do. Honestly, don't settle. Push yourself. It shouldn't be easy. Life is not easy. So navigate life as best as you can and you'll succeed.
I'm curious now. You mentioned football again, and then you mentioned the Army Navy game. Now, who's your team? You're from New York, so you got a couple options. Let's hear it.
Well, as far as professional football, I would definitely say game. I think you know where I'm going to go with that one.
Yeah. All right. Okay. We'll allow it. Thank you, Mr. Anfang. That was awesome. You're
Is there
very
any questions?
Second.
Do we have any questions from anyone in?
I'm checking the chat right now. There was no questions. We do have some people on here. If anyone has any last minute questions for Mr. Anfang, we can answer them right now. We'll stand by for a minute or two.
Okay, it looks like there's somebody coming through. I see a Mr.
Someone's typing up here.
I believe it's the Colonel.
Yes, it is. This is our PMS. Mr. Anfang. Okay.
You're very welcome, sir. Thank you for having me. And you have a fine recruit here. He was definitely very proactive in his young career in the Army is starting off on a good foot. So thank you for his mentorship and helping him out. And thank you for having me this evening, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Anfang. Can't thank you enough for dedicating your time to, I know you have a busy schedule being a police officer and being a father, but taking the time and hop on this podcast with us. That's going to be it for tonight, folks. Until next time, our next podcast will be next month, and we'll be focusing on the topic of Army values with our very own Steel Battalion alum. So stay tuned. Mr. Anfang, before you leave, as a token of appreciation, we did want to get you something I have here in Pennsylvania, a little bit of swag. I don't know if you might want to bring it to the department, but we do.
Absolutely.
We do plan to send you it off. There's some goodies in here too. So we'll get that en route to you as soon as possible. I hope you like it. Everyone else, have a nice night. Forged in fire.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.